Well, hello YouTube, it's me, Fortmaster, and welcome to a new reaction, and this is how the Amazing Digital Circus echoes its inspiration. So this is made by Raider Witch, and honestly, this was just one of those videos I saw in my suggestion feeds, but I really like the Amazing Digital Circus, and just the thumbnail on this looks really good. And honestly, it's been one of those things that you kind of forget. But now that I'm thinking about it, I am, kind of curious how it is going to connect. Because if you didn't know, the Amazing Digital Circus, as, Gooseworks has said, was inspired by and based off of, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. And honestly, at this point, I have really no idea how that's going to play out. Because again, the whole point of, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream is that, Am, the crazy supercomputer, has, a bunch of humans that, it killed all of humanity except for 5 that it keeps around just to torture. But then, here we have in Digital Circus, we have Kane, who is seemingly not the most, mentally stable at the time of recording, having no friends, and basically, learning that nobody likes him and that nobody likes his adventures. So I have, and from what I've heard, the next episode, from what I've heard, is supposedly going to, be, a big breaking point for a good portion of the fandom, so I have no idea what that's supposed to mean. But honestly, again, just any ideas of how it could connect, because, is Kane gonna become an actual villain, actually torturing the humans? Because up until this point, he's done nothing malicious. So, is it going to start becoming malicious? I honestly don't know. Yeah, definitely want to get into this video and see what has to be said. So, yeah, let's get into it then. So, of course, as always, original video is linked in the description if you haven't seen it for some reason. Corner video will lead to my Let's Play of the day. And if you like this video or any other video that I make, I'd very much appreciate it if you gave the video a like and subscribe to my channel. Because over 3/4 of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed, and I'd very much like that to change, because my next big goal is hopefully hit 6,000 subscribers by the end of the year. But yeah, with all that out of the way, let's get this thing started then, shall we?
A very strange thing happened to me recently. I began reading and playing through I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. This point-and-click adventure game is an adaptation of the short story written by Harren Ellison, and details the short adventure of 5 survivors on a lifeless Earth controlled by the all-powerful master computer, Am.
Honestly, I think I remember, I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream was actually one of the first playthroughs I ever actually saw on YouTube, or at least one of the full, complete ones. And I remember, I don't remember much about it, but I remember that, in each chapter of the game, for lack of a better word, because for each chapter you play as one of the humans, you're given a clue book. But if you use the clue book, that actually decreases the ending you can get.
I had a little fun playing the interesting but slightly dated point-and-click, and then, taking a break, I watched the new episode of the Amazing Digital Circus. And while I watched, I noticed some things. I noticed a lot of things. The more I looked, the more I realized just how similar the two series are, which should be no surprise since the Digital Circus was inspired by I Have No Mouth. But there was just so much more than that surface level, it's like Am if he was a silly prankster, that I hear all the time. Each character from I Have No Mouth directly corresponds to another character in the Digital Circus in ways that simply cannot be a coincidence.
Wait,
except
really?
for one, but I'll get into that later.
Oh,
Most of the information I'll be pulling from the video game, but I still think there's details in the original story that are worth mentioning. When I get to one, I'll do my best to make it clear. Even though it may seem obvious, I have to mention a massive spoiler warning for both I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream and the Amazing Digital Circus.
Well, when it comes to the Amazing Digital Circus spoilers, I've done reactions to every episode that's come out so far, so, link in the whatever corner, I think it's that one.
You have been warned. With that out of the way, allow me to go in further detail about the most obvious character connection.
Am and Kane, yeah, both AIs. Both crazy.
Am is the literal embodiment of hate. He feels nothing but hate for everything that breathes and thinks, and the reason for this wrath can actually be connected to the series' title. Am was born out of mankind's paranoia and distrust of itself. Cold War paranoia dominated the world in one form or another from the beginning of civilization. The thoughts of, what are our enemies doing? How can we stop them? Can we trust our allies? Are questions that have fueled unethical actions against man for generations. And so, 3 great supercomputers were created. One Russian, one Chinese, and one American, each built to spy on one another. Soon, the computers became so advanced that they sensed each other and merged to create the personification of all this paranoia and hate that had been fed into it. And so, it grew so more advanced that it went on to demolish all of humanity and life on Earth as we know it. The only living beings that were spared were 5 survivors, uniquely chosen to be tortured forever. And for 109 years, that is exactly what transpired. The computer called itself AM. Not Allied Master Computer, not Adaptive Manipulator, not Aggressive Menace.
AM. AM. Not just Allied Master Computer, but AM. Cogito ergo sum.
I think, therefore I am.
AM is likely the most hateful being in fiction, having limitless power but unable to have the capacity to use it to do anything for itself. It forces the 5 souls it is trapped to suffer because it too suffers. AM is angry. It is dissatisfied with its existence. The narrator and one of the 5 tortured souls of the story, Ted, describes this.
We had given AM sentience. Inadvertently, of course, but sentience nonetheless. But it had been trapped. AM wasn't God. He was a machine. We had created him to think, but there was nothing it could do with that creativity. In rage, in frenzy, the machine had killed the human race, almost all of us, and still it was trapped. AM could not wander. AM could not wonder. AM could not belong.
Honestly, I remember from the Let's Play I watched of the game years ago, one of the other lines that I remember was that it's like a bit of a spoiler for the game. You come across like the remnants of the minds and the sentiences of the other 2 supercomputers inside AM that are kind of just being hidden because like AM subsumed them. And they talk to one of the humans about why AM is so hateful, and they basically describe it as he has the powers of a god in the body of an invalid, and that's just the dichotomy of potential and actual being is just what's driven him absolutely nuts.
He could merely be, and so, with the innate loathing that all machines had always held for the weak, soft creatures who had built them, he had sought revenge. And in his paranoia, he had decided to reprieve 5 of us for a personal and everlasting punishment that would never serve to diminish his hatred, that would merely keep him reminded, keep him amused, keep him proficient at hating the human race. Man and woman, immortal, trapped, subject to any torment he could devise for us from the limitless miracles at his command. He would never let us go.
Now that you know who AM is, how does he relate to Cain? Cain is a silly guy who looks like a mouth, and he sends the characters inhabiting the circus on...
I have no mouth and I'm gonna scream. The guy who's literally just a mouth. Okay. I knew that, the Amazing Digital Circus had connections to I have no mouth and I'm a scream. I literally never put it together. They would be that literal.
Wacky fun adventures because he feels like it. He's basically in control of each scenario that the characters must take on in each episode. He creates AIs for them to interact with who, despite seeming to be alive, are not. Something that means they do not matter to him.
Oh, looks like one of these guys made it through.
Wait, what?
AM also does this, filling his scenarios he creates for the survivors with fake people. And AM does not care about these fake people either. To both AIs, these artificial characters are just tools they use to further the experience they put their contestants through. If AM did care about these fake people, he would create millions and millions to torture over and over again. But he doesn't, because he knows their emotions and pain will not be real. It differs slightly from Cain's excuse of not knowing who is real, but the point still stands.
Honestly, I remember My whole theory, and I'm pretty certain at this point it's basically just fact at this point, but the theory I had at the beginning of the Amazing Digital Circus was the fact, well, and even, and the whole thing with Kane was, Gooseworks said that Kane was basically not designed, to take care of humans long term, and I've always just thought of it as, he was designed, as the AI for the game. And, as, the game is supposed to be designed, or as I would imagine it's supposed to be designed, you're in there for a short while, maybe a couple of hours at max, you take the headset off, you turn it off, and you leave. And Kane, as he's designed and as what we've seen, is probably just absolutely perfect for that. But as he's been kind of forced into the position as, like, caretaker of these humans for, like, literal years, you see, like, all the stuff that he lacks when taking care of these people. Like, this basically sort of build up over time, given that he can't really connect with them properly. Or, chooses not to. Again, it's kind of, up in the air right now.
Both of these AIs value or even need the human emotion that their creations or adventures bring about. In addition, both of these AIs happen to be able to alter reality and create small worlds for their group of survivors to have adventures in. In both scenarios, they're not real. In the Amazing Digital Circus, they're clearly digital and confined by digital laws like jank physics and the fact that the characters don't really get hurt or need to eat. While in I Have No Mouth, everything from the buildings to the plant life is constructed by AM, seemingly on a whim. Both of these AIs are gods of their realms, but they are not omnipotent. They have ears and eyes everywhere, but they can't read your mind or have constant tabs on you. In I Have No Mouth, Ellen, one of the survivors Am holds hostage, is able to communicate with a forgotten piece of Am, who helps her escape her scenario because Am cannot hear the two speak over the sound of some rushing water. In the Amazing Digital Circus, the entire first episode has Pomni rushing around to find Kane so he can help her handle the abstraction situation, because he had no idea it was going on. The thread that really ties these two together, though, and that I never see anybody discuss, is that these characters are dissatisfied. Neither of them is getting what they want by doing what they're doing. Am realizes this and has become more insane than any of the survivors already are as it lashes out at them, using his games to torture them to revel in their pain. But like I said earlier, he is angry that he has been created. His games are an act of revenge, and throughout all of the torture he inflicts, he will never be satisfied with the situation he is in. Kane desperately wants his adventures to be met with excitement and joy. He cannot seem to understand that the members of the circus oftentimes do not like the adventures they're put through. And 99% of the time, when met with any form of criticism or the fact that the characters don't like the adventures, he either lashes out for a split second, glitches and forgets it, or directly silences whoever told him the truth he doesn't want to hear.
And again, like, with that whole relationship, Zubul is like the biggest offender in this, because they know firsthand that, Kane is unstable when it comes to this part, yet they're always the one pushing the buttons, always the one calling Kane out. Yet at the same time, they're so dismissive. Like that one part in, episode 3, where, they have the therapy session, and they tell Kane to forget it. Again, seemingly forgetting that Kane, being an AI, probably took that literally, and literally forgot everything they were talking about.
What did you even zip up? I don't have a mouth.
Kane isn't evil. He's simply incapable of understanding any emotion at all, proven by how poorly his therapy session with Zubul went in episode 3. When Kaufmo abstracts in episode 1, he simply goes,
"And into the cellar you go,"
and puts him in the basement with all the other abstractions, completely forgetting about him entirely seconds later. This isn't because he doesn't like Kaufmo, it's because he isn't programmed to care about anyone more than he is to do his job, so he forgets about them immediately. Kane is dissatisfied because as an AI, it appears he was programmed with one purpose: to create fun worlds for the inhabitants of the circus to explore and have fun in, and nothing else. He was not programmed to be a friend to anyone on a deep level or to care about the emotions of others. Kane's dissatisfaction comes from the reaction of the characters to his adventures and his antics. Throughout the series, he becomes more and more desperate for the characters to enjoy his adventures, and even cracks slightly in episode 6 after his adventure gets hijacked by Jax. For the rest of the episode, he barely features until the popularity contest, and when he receives no votes, he does this. Kane's adventures not being received well, and Kane himself not being received well, is pushing him towards his breaking point. A point that will no doubt cause him to snap and do something drastic very, very soon.
Again, that's the whole thing. Like, the worst part is, is the fact that probably, Kane isn't even complete, probably. Again, like, this is a video game in an that's seemingly still running, just in an abandoned building, probably an abandoned game studio or something like that. So it was never released or anything like that. So Kane is probably, like, still in a beta or alpha state, which is why he's so, like, incompetent, I guess would be, for lack of a better word. I mean, if he had, like, if the people who built him, like, had iterated on him and given him, like, a more comprehensive, ability to, like, read and understand basically, human emotions, or maybe just for him to be a bit tougher, to criticism, or a bit more resilient to criticism, like, I guarantee, like, most of the problems in the circus would not be happening.
As for what that is, it's difficult to say. Kane is a machine that feels his purpose is underappreciated, and as an AI, he is physically unable to find a new one. Just like Am, Kane is all-powerful, but at the same time feels powerless.
And yet, just as a little side tangent, there was also Bubble. The whole part, when Kane is freaking out, like, oh, they like the Suggestion Box adventures more than the me adventures. What should I do? And, like, Bubble for a split second says, you should die. As in, like, oh, your purpose has failed, kill yourself. And then when they reset, you should throw a beach party, as in you should celebrate because they found something that they like. So, like, those two, like, just diametrically opposed viewpoints. Like, again, like, I've seen so many theories about what Bubble is, and the fact that they seemingly share a tongue means that they're connected in some way. Like, what are you, Bubble? Like, and how are you connected to Kane? Are you like those little tiny pieces of the other supercomputers in Am? Is that what's going on? Are you able? A Bubble? Oh God, oh no.
And with that, let us turn our attention to the next set of characters in this analysis.
The humans. Gorrister and Gangle?
Gorrister is a character that can be viewed as a person who has lost all hope. He's one of the 5 survivors Am has kept alive, and through his torture he has been turned from somebody with hopes and dreams of a better tomorrow into someone who is suicidal, hopeless, and hates himself. In the events of the game, his scenario that he has been put through forces him to face what he did to his wife before Am came to power. Gorrister had beat his wife in an altercation that later resulted in his wife being sent to an asylum. This event hangs over Gorrister, and the guilt makes him feel
especially when, she's literally on a meat hook.
Powerless, suicidal, and hopeless. If you manage to complete Gorrister's scenario the right way, you can help him move on, atone for his past, and let go of his self-hatred. At first glance, this feels a bit difficult to connect to Gangle, the sad one of the Digital Circus' ensemble. But if you look closely, you'll begin to see some of the similarities. In a lot of interactions with the other cast, Gangle feels powerless. Jax even calls her submissive and agreeable in episode 2.
Yeah.
Gangle is someone whose hopes and dreams have been shattered.
If I was in the same room, smack.
Each time her comedy mask is shattered, she remains stuck in a sort of sad state. The thing is, these masks, this represents a form of masking. Masking is a technique
literally,
that people
yeah,
use to appear socially acceptable. It is, in a sense, acting a certain way around people you are uncomfortable being your true self around. I don't think this relates to Gorrister. I think this is unique to her character and a way to provide representation to people like her, who feel that they have to mask. In episode 4, she alludes to her hopes of being an artist and how they didn't quite work out.
I want to be a comic artist and eventually launch my own manga-inspired webcomic. And it's cool to have dreams, but you also need to remember that they're completely unrealistic, and you need to stop trying.
Giving up hope, depressed. Yeah, I'm seeing the connections now.
This is expanded upon in episode 5, where it's revealed she worked in fast food after dropping out of community college.
I worked in fast food.
You've done more than that. What about your art?
I was in community college for graphic design, but I dropped out. I didn't really pursue art much after that.
Art is something that's very, very difficult to make a living off of. It doesn't matter how good you are at it. You have to constrain your creative vision so it can be compatible with capitalism. You have to appeal to as many people as possible to be successful, and sometimes something passionate meant for a small group of people just can't survive out there. Gangle was likely unable to make it work full-time, which is something lots of artists out there can relate to. Speaking of which, you should like and subscribe and give me money using the Super Thanks feature. Tell all your friends about me. You wouldn't want me to end up working in fast food, would you? Anyway, Gangle takes Gorister's loss of hope and reinvents it with new tools and traits to create a much, much more interesting character. One of their best moments in episode 6 was seeing her mask break to show she was smiling underneath, not masking, genuinely having a great time with her friend Zubul. Also like Gorister, at the end of episode 4, she almost kinda kills herself. Whether it was intentional or not is debatable, but I feel like connecting this moment to the fact Gorister longs for death more than any other character is worth saying. Gangle is a thoughtful take on a hopeless character, one that appears to have been given space to grow and overcome her struggles, and by the end of the series, maybe she'll be a far cry from the hopeless, sad character she was based on. It's definitely something I'd love to see.
Yeah. Agatha. Oh, okay, yeah, I can definitely see the abuse angle there. Though with Elaine, I believe it was sexual abuse, while with Ragatha, it's like parental abuse, which, I mean, hopefully wasn't sexual. Ugh. Trying to think, who would other people be connected to? So, there was Nemdoc, who I think was a former Nazi scientist. Kinger? I mean, there's the whole Kinger theory that he was, well, pretty much, theory, quote-unquote, which was confirmed in the last episode, but, of him being a developer? At the same time, there was the, oh god, I'm forgetting, there's the one character that Am basically devolved into, like, an ape man, could he... No, he'd probably be like Zubul or something, given, the whole dysmorphia with a different body. Oh god, now I'm so confused. Abused peacekeepers.
Ellen is a black woman, and the only woman in I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, something that Am frequently reminds her of. Ellen is a character that is defined by a few things: her empathy for others, her morals, and her femininity. Girl. Ellen is a girl soul, something that another character, Ted, who we'll get into later, absolutely hates. In the short story, Ellen has sex with the other survivors as a way to give them relief from Am's torment. I could talk about the sexist implications of a story written in the late 1960s, but frankly, I feel it speaks for itself. Yeah. Ellen really does care about the other survivors, something that Ted, a paranoid cynic, simply cannot understand. So in turn, he chooses
Okay, so Ted is connected to Jax. Okay, I'm seeing it now.
To resent her for it, even when she sleeps with him multiple times out of turn to try and make him feel better. In an apocalyptic, torturous reality, Ellen still chooses to be kind and considerate to others because she can. Here I have to put an adult content warning. If you do not want to hear mentions of SA, please skip to the timestamp. I believe Ellen has the best written scenario in the game. Throughout her level, she is forced to face her strange fears of the color yellow in tight spaces. Even in the intro, Am taunts her about these fears, while trapping her in an infinitely closing and opening yellow cage. Throughout the scenario, we learn that Ellen was a tech prodigy, a top-of-her-class computer expert that has no problem repairing live wires, accessing and reprogramming complicated technology, and understanding unorthodox blueprints. As you progress, you're eventually teleported to an elevator, one with dates on its keypad instead of floors. As she presses the dates, more and more information is revealed about her past, explaining she was a genius engineer, had a loving husband, had a miscarriage, lost her husband in a pool of her own depression, got back on her feet, and one night at her new job,
you left your office after working late at the Inside corporate headquarters building.
Oh, here it comes.
The 7th floor for a maintenance man. To your horror, he inserted his key into the control panel and locked the elevator.
She was raped in an elevator by a man in a yellow jumpsuit. The event left her bloody, violated, and so scared she couldn't testify at a court hearing for the rapist, with a crowd of other women. After realizing what her scenario is trying to put her through, she fights back, beating back her attacker and escaping, refusing to be taken advantage of. This paints Ellen as a victim, a kind and empathetic person who knows what it feels like to be a victim of abuse. And
I mean, granted, just a single thwack with a cup and that's all it took. I mean, God, I wish it was that easy, but at the same time, this was a point-and-click adventure game made in the 90s, so, I mean, there's a limit to what you can show.
Wouldn't wish that pain on anyone else. Ragatha is a very kind and empathetic person. She's typically the first to notice when someone isn't feeling well and does her best to comfort them. She doesn't just do it because she feels like it, she really does care about the other characters, even Jax, who seems to hate her specifically for showing this kindness. Spoiler alert, Jax and Ted are connected characters we'll get into later.
As
I
I
think
thought,
bringing them up both a little early to relate them to these characters is important. Both Jax and Ted bring up Ragatha and Ellen a lot. Ellen is also the only character that appears in another character's scenario, that being Ted's. Both of these characters are so paranoid that they see someone who is being kind to them as a threat. But neither Ellen or Ragatha give up on being kind. They both choose to be kind people despite the fact that they aren't appreciated for it. It may be that both of these characters have felt how being abused or neglected feels, and wouldn't want anybody else to have to deal with those feelings. Ragatha doesn't often fight back. I mean, she gets shot by Jax before the gunfight in episode 6 and initially has nothing to say about it. In tandem with that, she sometimes refuses to tell people what she really thinks, out of fear that it might hurt them. In episode 4, she lets it slip that she found Gangle annoying with her new mask while intoxicated, which she did apologize for.
damn stupid sauce.
This is because Ragatha's #1 priority, like Ellen, isn't telling the truth, it's keeping the peace, even if she herself has to suffer for it. Ragatha also worries a lot about the people she's failed, that being Jax and Pomni. In episode 6, she discusses how she feels that her efforts to get on their good side failed, and that she's pushing them away with her kindness, and that they resent her for it. She focuses more on the relationships between characters than anyone else, something that again connects her to Ellen. In episode 5, it is revealed that Ragatha came from a wealthy family, which can relate to Ellen's promising achievements early in her life. Both of these people were on a great track in life, but both of these people are victims of abuse. Ragatha downplays it, but she alludes that her mother was not as kind to her as Ragatha is to others.
Yeah.
Lots of people who have suffered abuse or neglect tend to downplay the impact it had on them in front of others. But I still think that since it was impactful enough to be mentioned, Ragatha suffered enough emotional abuse to be mindful about how words can make others feel. Something I like about both the Amazing Digital Circus and I Have No Mouth is that I can be drawn to different aspects of a lot of characters. I really like Jax's character, but I don't relate to his struggles. I'm not the world's biggest Ragatha or Ellen fan, but I deeply relate to their struggles and what motivates them. I can relate more to Gorrister than any other character, but he's not my favorite character. That would be Ted. I think it shows that both of these stories are so well written that I don't just focus on one character and one character only. Props to Gooseworks and Harlan Ellison for giving these worlds their all. Ragatha and Ellen.
Oh god, again. It's sad we don't have him around anymore. But I mean, I honestly really wish there'd be like a good adaptation of I Have No Mouth and I Will Scream. Again, but you'd have to have it be made by somebody who was like really good. It's like, God, I could not imagine how bad it would be if you had somebody who just like this did like a hack job on the script. Ugh.
Both peacekeepers. They believe with all the struggles their groups are presented with, how they interact does not have to be a struggle. If they can all get along, things can be easier and more enjoyable for everyone.
Benny, Benny and Zubul, okay, yeah.
Benny is a tragic character. From an outward perspective, Benny is the character who's been the most affected by Am's torture. He's been disfigured and distorted physically and mentally into a horrible, ape-like creature, with a lack of thinking power to match. In the game, he isn't even able to speak, as his vocal cords have long been ripped out. All the dialogue that comes from him comes from within his own mind, or from typing on a keyboard to properly communicate. Benny is the character who changes the most between the short story and the game. His entire backstory differs in the book, likely because it would have been too similar to Nimdocs if it had been translated to the game. In the short story, according to Ted, he had once been a handsome, brilliant, and homosexual scientist, and Am tortured him by stripping him of each of these assets, including his sexuality, committing the horrible crime of making him straight, stupid, and ugly. The story goes as far to describe that Am had given him a massive dick, which was thankfully not translated into the game. In the game, Benny was an army commander before Am changed him, who was guilty of the sin of shooting one of his own men because he thought they would slow them down, in addition to 3 witnesses. In Benny's scenario, he has to learn to think of people other than himself, and to be more than the animal he appears to be. Benny's presence in the story is less about his individual lesson to learn, and more about his punishment for existing under Am's rule. Benny represents the ultimate power Am has over the survivors. His form and existence says, "There is nothing about you that I cannot change for my own amusement." Your thoughts, your face, your body, your values, your intelligence, your sexuality, your senses. All of them are mine.
God, that was another thing I remember from the Let's Play I watched. I was saying, like, the first thing he says, or thinks when the chapter begins, after, tumbling downstairs is, oh god, Am has given me my mind back, and he, like, the way he sounds, he almost sounds scared, because he's still, like, disfigured and animal-like on the outside. And just, again, that level of dysmorphia right there, that's horrible.
Alter as I see fit. And so, Benny is tortured by the body he has been forced to inhabit. Zooble is, in my opinion, a much more light and optimistic take on Benny. Zooble is an irritable but well-meaning character whose most distinctive trait is their physical appearance and their dissatisfaction over it. In episode 3, Zooble sits down to have a sort of therapy session with Kane after not going on adventures for the first 3 episodes. In this session, we learn 2 things. 1, Kane is not capable of caring or understanding anybody's emotions but his own.
Zooble, look at this cool bee I drew!
And secondly, Zooble is intensely dissatisfied by their jumbled up physical appearance, which explains why Zooble hadn't been present in many adventures until that point. Or maybe it's because her giant model wouldn't have fit in here, or there, or any other small cramped space. Hashtag noticing.
I mean, granted, in episode 1, we see that, Zooble can be disassembled, so, just take it apart and mush it together, smaller space.
Zooble tries changing their appearance with new parts every episode, but nothing seems to fit right. They're also upset at the fact they're unable to have sex, which is a normal thing to be upset about. Humans, mostly, enjoy having sex. Being stripped of that ability would definitely lead to the afflicted being upset about it. This bodily dissatisfaction can be interpreted as a representation of gender dysphoria. Zooble may be moody, but they are someone who cares. They set up a funeral for Kaufmo at the end of the 2nd episode. They're empathetic towards Pomni after being transported to the circus, and they're very supportive of Gangle, really helping her come out of her shell in the last few episodes.
Yeah.
Zooble and Benny have a lot in common, and they are both based around the idea of their body being distorted and twisted to the point of being a prison. Their AI overlords seem to have paid special attention to them over other survivors in many ways, as Kane constantly tries to impress Zooble throughout the series.
Why did you think I would like that?
And Am physically tortures Benny more than any other character. Both Benny and Zooble have been stripped of their sexuality. I am citing the book's backstory for Benny here, but I still think it's a valid point of comparison to make.
Yeah.
But I don't think Benny and Zooble are one-to-one. I think Zooble's dysphoria and body image is a character trait that's meant to be something relatable to people who struggle with it, which is a great change. Benny's physical distortions are meant to serve more as reminders of the absolute power Am has over the survivors, and to freak out the viewer a bit. I'm glad Zooble takes this more positive direction for their characters. I don't think making them a torture toy would have been a good idea.
Again, the whole idea, and we have no idea how, the humans in, the Amazing Digital Circus, how their forms in-game are, affected by, how they were outside. And again, given the whole sort of, incomplete and beta nature of, everything in the game, I wouldn't put it out there that a good portion of, how they look was based on, an actual part of their personality outside, and there was no actual, character creation. So maybe, Zooble outside literally did have, gender dysphoria, or something of that nature, and, the game, not really capable of translating that properly, made them into this toy box character made of many different parts that never really go together properly. And then with, as I said before, Kane possibly being in a beta or alpha state, is just physically, or I should say mentally, not capable of truly understanding Zooble's plight.
Nonetheless, Zooble's relatable, real-world struggles were a great way to translate Benny's physical distortions and suffering into a modern, more kind and hopeful adaptation.
Nimdok.
I'll start this one by saying Nimdok is by far my least favorite character of the original survivors. In the original story, it's difficult to identify how he relates, if at all, to the other survivors. Nimdok is a withered old man with a German accent, and in the game, he was a doctor who assisted the monstrous Dr. Mengele in mutilating hundreds of innocent men, women, and children during the Holocaust, in the name of science. The characters throughout the scenario even refer to him as a butcher, which is an accurate description considering a child is downright terrified of him, calling him a legend. Something defining about Nimdok is that he can't actually remember the atrocities he has committed. He has to piece together what he had done by talking to his victims and co-conspirators. In the good path, he comes to realize what he has done and tries to atone for his mistakes, by giving control of a powerful golem to the Jewish people instead of using it to wipe them out during a breakout. Unlike in the real world, where Dr. Mengeler's work essentially amounted to nothing but medical malpractice and obtuse cruelty for the Jewish people, in this scenario it is shown that his discoveries became tools Am used in its games, explanations for the otherworldly power Am wields against the survivors. His work not only created technology used to rearrange DNA at will, but Nimdok helped create a serum that provided immortality to those who drank it, giving an explanation to how the survivors of Am's game have not aged for 109 years. Now, how this connects to Kinger is more theory than fact at this point, but with how these connections keep being made, I still think it's very likely that Kinger and Nimdok share the helped create the situation the characters are in part of their backstory.
Yeah.
Kinger is someone who isn't quite all there. Most of the time, what he says doesn't make sense, and his failing memory is something that the two share. He frequently forgets what he's doing and where people are, and also like Nimdok, he is in fact the oldest character according to Kinger isn't always a nutcase. When he's in the dark, it is revealed that he can think much more clearly and remember much more about his past and the world around him.
Which actually, saying it out loud, that is kind of a weird trait, that when he's in the dark, where, you know, usually when you say somebody's in the dark, that means they're out of the loop or unknowledgeable. But no, when Kinger's in the dark, that's when he's the most knowledgeable. I wonder if there's some form of symbolism there.
Which gives explanation for why he always stays in his fort or puts a bucket on his head. When Kinger's head is clear, it's shown he can be a much more wise and even helpful person. When he's like this in episode 3, he mumbles something about
7 years of computer science for this, huh?
Fun fact, takes about 5 years for the average person to complete a PhD in computer science, meaning Kinger was at one point likely some sort of computer genius, which could, in theory, give him the skills he needed to create or help create the digital circus. Additionally, in episode 6, Kinger says this.
I couldn't help but hate myself for the things I thought I was responsible for.
Which is another giant hint he had helped create the circus in some way.
Which I really have to wonder, I wonder, is there a specific reason, if he did create, you know, the digital circus, or helped create it at the very least, why he hasn't told anybody? Because, I mean, granted, I know he's not in the dark all the time, but, thinking about it, because, the other circus members seemingly don't know that he had a wife in the circus as well. So, what is the purpose of, you know, if you're not in a dark room, is it just a thing of, oh, it didn't come up or something? Because, again, there was the whole thing of, you know, he created the healing butterfly just out of nowhere. It was oh, I just created it right now. And then, Brackets is what, you can do that? You know...
Kinger helping to create the digital circus is a very, very popular theory, and I fully believe that at this point, it might as well be canon. I firmly believe that Kinger, before being transported here, has at least worked on creating the digital circus, Kane, or both. I think the Nimdok comparison makes that all the more likely that he has, and if he doesn't, I will be very, very surprised. Pushing this theory even further, in episode 6, Kinger is able to just summon a butterfly to heal him, Ragatha, with no explanation. Is this something everyone can do? Is this something he remembers how to do from creating the game? Either way, him being able to do it first furthers both the Kinger helped create the circus theory and his connection to Nimdok.
Honestly, my personal theory right now is the fact that maybe because he might be a developer, he's in a developer mode or a debug mode in the circus, which may be partially why hasn't abstracted. It's why he's insane at this point, because maybe his vision is completely full of debug information, and it's just kind of driven him mad. But when he actually does, you know, stabilize and become sane temporarily again, that's when he's able to actually do stuff like that.
Kinger and Nimdok are both people who've forgotten who they are and what they've done. While Kinger's arc has not been completed yet, I think they'll continue to go on the path to remember who they are, and like Nimdok, face what he's done. Beneath it all and what he might have done, though, when his head is in the right place, Kinger is a kind, gentle soul who has given great pieces of advice to characters who need it.
Ted and Jax. Yep, here we go.
I believe that both Jax and Ted are the most complicated and interesting characters of their respective stories. Among the survivors of Am's torment, Ted has, by far, the most depth. Ted is defined by his intense, deranged paranoia. What appears to be a suave ladies' man is someone who cannot trust anything around him. not even his own thoughts. In the original story, Ted acted as the narrator, and throughout the tale he's tormented more by his own thoughts than any other character. He holds a particular distrust against Ellen. In the short story, he looks down on Ellen for having sex with the other survivors to sort of keep them sane, an act he also takes part in, but an act he seems not to enjoy.
Yeah.
Even when Ellen sleeps with him twice out of turn, he doesn't see it as Ellen being appreciative of him that he had found food earlier, he sees it as Ellen trying to get on his good side, to trick him. His relationship with Ellen is the most important character relationship in the story, as it's touched on even in the game, where relationships between characters are almost never touched on in favor of exploring individual characters' psyches. In the game, his outward distrust for Ellen is replaced by an inward admiration of her. She is the titular princess in the tower that he needs to save in his scenario. Unlike in the short story, Ted is outwardly charismatic in the game, vain even, which Am implies is a massive front for his true feelings. In the short story, this front is left out. Ted is an openly paranoid and cynical individual, and the only person who believes he has been unaffected by Am's torture, despite the fact he certainly has been affected by it. Ted frequently sees and hears things that may not be there, and is convinced the other survivors are secretly conspiring against him. Another fun fact, Ted is the youngest of the survivors, according to the short story. So, what I get from these two...
Okay, again, like, I'll say it again. Like, I knew, The Amazing Digital Circus was based on I Have No Mouth, but I did not realize there were this many connections!
Two portrayals of the same character is that Ted is a cynical, distrustful person who puts up a charismatic, somewhat dickish front to protect himself from psychological torture. Who does that remind us of?
Yep!
Jax is, at first glance, only portrayed as an asshole. A cynical asshole who doesn't care about anybody but himself. One that's especially spiteful and distrustful of the feminine, empathetic caretaker of the group.
Again, it's the whole thing. I mean, as said in episode 6, Jack believes he's the funny one, but, ironically, being the funny one, he can't stand being the butt of the joke, whether it's, whether it be like, the gun backfiring from Ragatha's finger being in the barrel, or like during the softball when, Jax is put in the maid costume. It's like, man, he was angry at that.
And for most of the series, that's what he's been. Until the most recent episode of the show, episode 6. Before this episode, we slowly saw Jax becoming more of a dynamic character, expressing emotions other than disinterest and assholery, such as fear, embarrassment, and an ability to kinda open up to someone. But this is the episode we really see him, not open up, but realize he might open up and shut down in response. Jax and Pomni's fight is one of the best written and acted scenes of the show, and it comes from a subversion of what the viewer expects. In every past episode, near the climax, we see a character open up a little, or a lot. Pomni speaks about her experience with the circus, Kinger is allowed to think for a short period and speak his mind, Gangle has her moment of clarity and begins working to handle her emotions, Zubul discusses their dysphoria and realizes Kane is not something that can understand human emotions, and Ragatha and Kinger have a little talk. But Jax does not open up. He aggressively lashes out at Pomni after Pomni tries to break down his walls because he is a paranoid, terrified man that can no longer trust the reality around him. He hides his true feelings and plays into the idea that everything around him is a game where he causes conflict and misery to make things interesting, and to push people away from him. It's no secret that Jax's old friends have abstracted. Both Kaufmo and especially Ribbit, the mysterious abstracted frog character, were implied to be his friends at some point. It was confirmed via Gooseworks' Tumblr that Ribbit had been the last character to abstract before the events of the show, meaning Jax, at the start of the show, had lost both his closest friends. The pain of loss and the fear of losing someone important to him again is likely the reason for Jax to put this front up. It may not be obvious, but Jax is a deeply paranoid individual because of this. There are multiple instances of Jax acting more fearful when he believes nobody is watching him. And with the context that he fears losing someone again, we can infer that every time he pushes someone away or acts like a jerk, it stems from this paranoia.
Oh, geez, yeah, you can't lose somebody if you don't have anybody. Yeah, that's a really helpful mindset to have right there, yeah.
This fear of getting too attached to someone only to lose them. Jax does not like Ragatha, or at least he says he doesn't. Instead of avoiding her, though, he chooses to torment and lambast her more than any other character, especially in recent episodes. The explanation he gives for this, again, paints him as paranoid.
I don't know. I think she tries way too hard. Like, we're stuck in... Why are you always pretending everything's always fine? Like, if you tell someone they're loved and appreciated every day, it just kind of loses all meaning.
He tries to push Ragatha away because she tried so hard to be his friend, and since Jax can't deal with the pain of losing someone again, he rejects her more than any other character, and despises how friendly towards others she is. Jax is a paranoid, narcissistic loner who cannot fathom the idea of trusting anyone ever again. Just like the character who inspired him, Ted. Only time will tell if he learns to grow and trust someone again, but if he doesn't, things might end on a poor note for him.
Right. Pomni doesn't have a connection to any of the previous characters. Oh.
Unlike every other character who directly relates to a character from I Have No Mouth, Pomni doesn't. While some might just write her off as an isekai protagonist, I think she's more than that.
I mean, they all are, technically.
Like a little bit of every character put together. The other characters can relate to her, and before her and Jax's fight, nobody was outwardly uncomfortable around her. After getting her bearings, she goes on to be there for a lot of characters. She bonds with others at Kaufmo's funeral, she learns to understand Kinger and his erratic personality and memory, she offers to close for Gangle in episode 4 when she's at her lowest, and she never hurt Gangle's feelings throughout the shift. In episode 5, she tries to calm the feud between Ragatha and Jax, and in episode 6, she and Jax seem to get along great. And for that split second that Jax seems happy during the hug, we can see that, as much as Jax doesn't want to admit it, he really does care about her beyond having fun and satisfying his need for action and violence. Pomni is more than just a lens for the story to be told through. She may be the most important character in the show for one reason. She's new. Pomni does not have any established relationships when entering the circus. She doesn't have anywhere to fit into the dynamic until she comes to grip with the new reality she has been thrown into. Everyone in the circus sees her in a positive way, besides Jax, who is forcing himself to feel negatively about her so he doesn't feel pain. Pomni is the character who, in the end, I think will bring the cast together, almost like a leader. To what end and why? Who knows? I didn't write The Amazing Digital Circus, and I don't know how it will end. I think the story will be well known years after it ends due to its creative animation, beautiful writing, and exciting character development. I have many predictions and theories about where the story might go after realizing these connections, but I refuse to make them public. I think if you want to make connections about the void being a pale white and the ice cave at the end of the survivor's journey being the same color, you're free to. I think if you want to make connections between the fact that both the Allied Master Computer and Cain and Abel logos are composed of 2 letters, it's your right. I think there's a very special connection to be made between Am and Cain's inability to properly enjoy the adventures they create. But I'll keep it to myself. All that I know is that I know nothing. And that I, the first person to ever make these connections, am more media literate than you will ever be. Bye-bye.
Okay. Again, very nice video, Ryder Weich. I definitely have to look to see if there are any other videos from you that I want to watch. I know, again, I love the Amazing Digital Circus so much, and I want, again, like a lot of people, I want to know how it ends. But the fact that it's only going to be 1 season, but thankfully, 9 episodes instead of just 8, but still only 9 episodes. I really have to wonder, what kind of ending to the series are we going to get? Because, if I had the ability, I'd want to ask Gooseworks the question on, their Tumblr, when she opens them up again. But, the ending we're going to get with, the Amazing Digital Circus, is it open to, the possibility of there being, in either a second season or a sequel series somewhere down the line if she thinks up a good enough idea? That's the question I want to ask her. Because honestly, again, the Amazing Digital Circus, obviously, to date, it is the biggest series that Glitch has made, and their most popular. And I mean, obviously, I want there to be more, but I want if there was to be more, I'd want it to be good. But yeah, that's definitely going to be it for now. So yeah, I hope you guys liked. If you did, leave a like, subscribe if you have not, and I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.